Can you tell us the backstory about what brought you to this career path? Yeah, first job was in sales when I was 8 years old, working for the family business on the Boxing Day sale, which is the day after Christmas here in the UK, where I was allowed to go and help them by going and standing in the tile store in this massive orange polo shirt and big brown warehouse coat, by helping people select tile oddments, basically. It was really good fun, and I did lots of other kind of sort of small jobs like that as I was growing up, and ultimately went to University of Birmingham, where I studied commerce and Spanish. From there, I went and worked for an organization in a mixture of jobs, from sales into marketing, as a product manager, a business development role, and going around Western Europe, helping our distributors and our subsidiaries and key accounts. And yeah, I enjoyed the commercial aspect of that, the training aspect of that, which encouraged me to go and get a job with a sales training company. I was a full-time trainer with them. And as a result of running a large opportunity with a customer, the Corona Academy, it let me go and set up and do my own thing. Can you share an interesting or amusing story that occurred to you in your career so far? Can you share the lesson or takeaway that you took out of that story? Yeah, okay. So I ran the academy for a beer company, for Corona Extra, which involved flying around Europe and helping teams to understand how to sell a Mexican beer. So that already was a lot of fun, particularly when you looked at the curriculum, which involved us taking people out and showing them some of the promotions we were talking about. As you can imagine, there were some quite amusing things there, which probably aren't appropriate to share. Had quite a lot of good things going on there. In my career, I've traveled a lot as well, and the travel is often a good story. I don't know if it's amusing, but once I was traveling from Sao Paulo in Brazil to Bogota, Colombia, turned up to the airport, plenty of time, all good to go, and I realized I had a yellow fever certificate, which I actually have got, but it wasn't with me, and they wouldn't have a copy or a picture or anything. So, long story short, I had to go via Chile, which I've always wanted to visit, just not under those circumstances, adding an extra 8 hours to the trip and only actually being in Chile for an hour, which is going out the airport and coming back in. So yeah, I guess the moral of the story, as many of these are, is planning. Planning, do your research, work out what it is that you need to do to be effective. Are you working on any exciting new projects now? How do you think that'll help people? I'm actually writing my second book at the moment. It's a book around hybrid selling. So given the way that sales is evolving and certainly some of the sort of modern occurrences or things which we're experiencing at the moment, it should help people because it's going to give them a really complete approach to the way in which a modern person needs to do something. So it's really looking at the different elements of the essentials they need to build on, how they're going to sell using virtual sales, video sales, social sales techniques, how they can manage opportunities, so properly drive through projects that's going to win business, how they can add value to customers. Value selling is still an important part. How they can lead customers. So, how they can become something of a servant leader and add value by guiding customers through their own process, through understanding the buying process and those challenges. And how they can expand business, how they can account manage, for want of a better word. So lots of elements. Modern salesperson needs to really bring lots of parts to what they do. And I think that is going to be the way that sales will evolve. So I'm trying to put some thoughts together. I am putting some thoughts together in how people can practically do that. None of us are able to achieve success without some help along the way. Is there a particular person who you're grateful towards who helped you get where you are? Can you share a story about that? I guess the person that springs to mind would be a guy called Alan Link, who was the person that really gave me the first opportunity in this, essentially gave me my first job. And the story behind it is that I actually hadn't applied for anything when I was at university, so probably too much fun. But one day I was in a rugby club and I was talking to a guy after the game, having a beer. He asked me a couple of questions about what I was doing. I answered, and all was well and good. A couple of days later, I got a phone call from my father, actually, who this guy knew and had got in touch with and said that he wanted to speak to me because they had a project that was absolutely ideal for me. The company was launching a product in Spain. They wanted someone who understood marketing and spoke Spanish. And that's pretty much what we've been talking about. So, yeah, he gave me the first opportunity in that first job. And then as that organization was expanding, there was a business development role, and he took a chance in giving me that rather than probably someone who's the most favored or people thought would get it. But yeah, I owe a lot to him for being in the position that I am now. Can you tell us a bit why you're the authority on the topic of sales? Yeah, I've been around the world 14 times, worked in 36 countries, worked with over 10,000 salespeople, and that's given me the opportunity to identify what are the challenges that they face. And I believe we can summarize these very broadly in three different sorts, which is busy, oldie worldy, and muddled mindset. Busy is when salespeople are rushing around, being incredibly active, doing lots of stuff, but the stuff they're doing is ineffective. And so this is something that needs to be done. I recognize that oldie worldy is another challenge salespeople have. They're stuck in the past. They're doing things that don't work anymore. And because they're doing this, again, they're not being effective, they're not getting results, and potentially they're annoying customers. Again, it's something we need to deal with. Muddled mindset is that salespeople sometimes aren't sure what it is they're actually trying to do. And often this is from an organizational level. They profess to be consultative, they profess to be solution salespeople, and they act this way, or encouraged to act this way, until we get near the end of the month or end of a quarter, and pressure is put on people to sell transactionally. So a poor salesperson doesn't really know what's going on. So I've identified these challenges, and then what I've done is taken my experience and my own research and understanding of sales to develop ways in which they can overcome those challenges. That's gone into my first book, Selling Through Partnering Skills, and it's something that I base my training around, and I now share with salespeople all over the world. As with nearly any business a person will enter will involve some form of sales. At the same time, most people have never received any formal education about how to be effective at selling. Why do you think our education system teaches nearly every other arcane subject, but sales, one of the most useful and versatile topics, is totally ignored? Don't start me on this. Well, you have. I feel really strongly about it. I really do. And that is why I actually give my time to the Student Sales Academy, which is something I'm running in conjunction with Nottingham Trent University, to help prepare students that aren't, even business students that aren't being developed in this area. So we open it out to a lot of different, the premise is that sales skills are life skills. And they absolutely are. If we're talking about influencing, if we're talking about persuading, if we're talking about trying to move people, then everybody will need that, even if not going into a business. The doctor needs to do that. A nurse needs to do that. Yeah, it is something that I do feel strongly about. Why are they ignored? Maybe it's not considered academic enough, which is crazy when you consider the amount of time and effort and research into what really works in sales. Is it that sales is considered a bit sleazy, and so we don't want to train people that? And then maybe we're stuck in the 80s or even back to the 1890s of the old snake oil salesperson. Again, why aren't we educating people in it? That could be one of the reasons. And maybe it's too difficult. Maybe it's too difficult to train people. Sales is a complex thing. There are some basics, and really that is what we should be training people in. As people develop a career, yes, they will go into a more sophisticated sale, and yes, that's where professional development takes place. So yeah, maybe it's just too hard. Marketing, we can break down into the 4 Ps, or it was when I was there, I believe it's 9 Ps now, or maybe the specialisms, digital marketing or SEO, whatever. And for sales, maybe people just find it too hard to do that. It's not for lack of people who understand this that can simplify it. Yeah, I think that there's a whole bunch of reasons. I'm doing my little bit to try and overcome some of that. This discussion, entitled How to Be Great at Sales Without Seeming Salesy, is making an assumption that seeming salesy or pushy is something to be avoided. Do you agree with this assumption? Whether yes or no, can you articulate why you feel the way you do? Okay, do I agree with it? I probably do. That people often do think this. But more importantly, I haven't got a problem with salespeople being pushy if it's done with the right intent. So let's put that out there. It's not a bad thing to be pushy. And why do I say that? Making decisions is hard. And so sometimes as a salesperson, we need to push, encourage, assist, guide, lead, whatever word you want to use, for the sake of the customer. And that's the important part. It's about the intent of why somebody's being pushy. Now, a good salesperson should have a good relationship with the customer. they will know why it's happening. They'll understand that they're being pushed, if you want to use that word, for their own. And it's actually something that the salesperson is probably finding as difficult as they are. So yeah, maybe salespeople should be salesy. It's their job. And if people understood better why they're doing it, great. If we're using salesy as a bit of a derogatory word in the manipulative and poor tactics, yeah, unfortunately, some people do still do that. Which is a shame. For me, sales is all about collaboration. And if we make it very clear, that is what we're trying to do as a professional salesperson or somebody in a selling role, then how we do that becomes far easier. The 7 stages of a sales cycle are usually broken down to versions of prospecting, preparation, approach, presentation, handling objections, closing, and follow-up. Which stage do you feel that you're best at? Which is your unique approach or secret sauce to that particular skill? I wouldn't pick one. I don't think you can pick one. I don't think it makes any sense to pick one. I think it needs the holistic approach. And I've already alluded to that with collaboration and that we need to be more collaborative. And if we do all of these things with a collaborative mindset, that's the secret sauce. That's how salespeople can be successful and how they don't come across as salesy. Now, the way that I help people get their heads around that and do something practical to collaborate is by understanding PQ, or partnering intelligence, partnering skills. So it's a concept that a guy called Steve Dent developed in the late 80s, early 90s, when he was looking at bigger, broader collaborations. So imagine airlines collaborating together. And what he found is, to cut a long story short, organizations don't partner, people do. And he looked at the skills that the people have to be able to partner better. And these were then validated, they're verified, and PQ, like PQ, is something that we can measure and we can understand. PQ involves trust. It makes sense for any salesperson to have that. It involves having a win-win focus. They're looking at a mutually beneficial outcome. It involves being interdependent. So understanding our success is based on other people's success. It involves elements of transparency. So it's giving information about yourself, also giving feedback to customers, to people you're working with about what they're doing or not to help you. It involves being comfortable with change. Now, salespeople are change agents. We're trying to get people to do things differently. So we need to be comfortable with that ourselves. And it involves a future orientation. So we're looking towards a shared goal, looking towards a vision. We're making decisions based on that. I think if we bring those and that thinking into every part of the sales cycle, all of them can be developed, can be delivered far more effectively. So lead generation or prospecting is one of the basic steps of the sales cycle. Obviously, every industry will be different, but can you share some of the fundamental strategies you use to generate good qualified leads? Okay, if I look what I do, I share information, try to share great information, try to be generous with it. It's about bringing customers onto you rather than forcing yourself on customers. That's how I see it. So personally, I like to use a scorecard. So a series of questions which customers can use to assess where they are about a certain thing. So it could be collaborative selling. And so the information that I can then provide is based on their responses. It can be immediately useful to them. They can start to warm to what it is that I can do. Now I can also use that information to see who's the best fit for working with me. So not everyone is going to be. And then can have meaningful conversations with the right people based on that information that's going to be relevant to them. So that's how I think many companies can use a similar type of thinking. Is give good information out there, make customers want to work with you, capture some information about them while still giving them stuff, then have far warmer conversations rather than playing the whole numbers game thing, which in my opinion just doesn't really work anymore. In my experience, I think the final stage of handling objections, closing, and follow-up are the most difficult parts for many people. Why do you think handling objections is so hard for people? what would you recommend for one to do to be better at handling objections? Stop calling it handling objections for a start, would be my first piece of advice. That doesn't help. It gets the psychology all wrong. An objection is something that we try to handle. We try to bat it back at people. So really we want to treat concerns with concern. So really that's what an objection is. Someone's concerned, they haven't understood something. They want more information. And so if we can recognize that that's actually what we're doing, we can understand all the things that they're not quite sure about. So rather than trying to bash things back, we'll say, what else do you need to know? What else do you need to know? Anything else that's important? And then deal with those effectively. It's not the 1980s anymore where selling with an arm wrestle and we're trying to manipulate people and prove ourselves, become a battle of wills. We don't want to work like that. We want to have people feeling comfortable, feeling safe, giving them the right information. So if we're experiencing lots of objections, concerns, whatever you want to call them, it's probably because we've not sold right. We've not done the earlier parts of the sales process effectively. People aren't ready to move ahead. So yeah, sell better is probably a piece of advice, and then get the mentality or the psychology to deal with that part of the sale. So closing is, of course, a proverbial holy grail. Can you suggest 5 things one can do successfully to close a sale without being perceived as pushy? Well, okay, asking isn't being pushy if you've done a good job, and it is the next logical step. Again, I would suggest a change of language. So closing feels quite final. It's like you close a door, it's finished. If we change the language to gain commitment to the next logical step, I think that immediately starts to help. Yeah, so I don't think we need 5 closing techniques. You know, that's, again, it's 80 sales. It's learning the Ben Franklin, it's learning the boomerang, the trial, the alternative. Look, there are ways of asking questions, but if you're getting the mindset right and people understand that we want to work together, we want to collaborate, there's something in it for both of us, it's about making the advancements, that next logical step, to get us to the point that we can both benefit from. So yeah, one thing to do is ask. I came across a great way of doing this. A guy called James Muir has written a book called The Perfect Close, where he's understood, or he's researched a number of areas, or he's researched how to ask the question. So it's based on data. And the way to ask the question is, I'm sure he won't mind me sharing this, does it make sense for us to, and put in the next thing. It's interesting because you get a yes or no answer. Yes, brilliant, let's move on. No, okay, what do you think is the next way? It's really very clever and proven in the science. In his book, he'll talk about far more ways of doing this, why it works so well, and a lot of the neuroscience. But for me, I'm sorry, I'm going to go with one thing, and that is ask questions, but do it well. Having established that that is the point that we are genuinely at, we've sold well. What are your thoughts about follow-up? Many businesses get leads who might be interested, but things never seem to close. What are some good tips for a business leader to successfully follow up and bring things to a conclusion without appearing overly pushy or overeager? Okay, so again, slightly different answer perhaps, but I would say qualify out. By that, what I mean is that many leads aren't actually real opportunities. We get this thing that we think, oh yeah, this is brilliant, this is something I might be able to make a sale, but actually it's not going to happen. It's not the right fit, it's not the right match, it's unlikely to happen. But people keep these because it makes the pipeline look brilliant. It makes it look like we've got lots of things that we can potentially do, but it's fantasy. So be very strict on what is a great opportunity. So when something comes along, we can compare it to that and yes, this is the sort of stuff we should throw our time and effort at. We need to get involved in this. If it's not looking like that, get rid of it. It's not going to turn into sale. You're going to waste time and effort doing it. When we get to the point that we're moving this forward, the follow-up kind of happens naturally because we're working with people who want to work with us, that we're going to make a difference with, and that it just makes sense to continue. So it starts at the beginning. Yeah, qualify out. Best piece of advice. As you know, there are many modes of communication today. For example, in-person phone calls, video calls, emails, text messages. In your opinion, which of these communication methods should be avoided when attempting to close a sale or follow up? Which are the best ones? So I wouldn't avoid any per se. All are valid, but it depends on the person that you're working with, depends on the circumstances, depends on the time. And that's the sales skill, is picking the right way to communicate with somebody. Just as if we're face to face and we're going to flex how we behave to do things which fits best with them as an individual, which we're kind of adapting to their personal style, we can do this in choosing the media of communication. So I think all goes. If that's what they want to do, not what's most convenient for us, well then, yeah, go with it, if it makes sense. One thing I would say that is worth looking at is video messaging. So rather than video calls, which are in time or synchronous, I'm talking about asynchronous communication. So it's recording a video and sending it to somebody. This is a powerful way to work. It's really just starting to take off, but it works really well because it can help us get the message in quite a clear way across to people. It's an interesting way. It's still quite a little bit different. So again, bit different, bit interesting. We can start to share elements of emotion. It's a person speaking. So something is key, something's important. We can emphasize that. It's also something that's a bit more interesting for people to share, so they can pass the video on to other people. All the time we're bringing that personal element to it. Some people think that technology is taking away the personal element. I think it's the opposite. I think we can augment the human, for want of a better word, because we can make sure that we put ourselves in front of customers more, perhaps, than when we were only visiting them face-to-face or only talking on the phone. So video is a very powerful way of achieving that. So I'd add that as a hint. If you'd inspire a movement that would bring the most amount of good to the greatest amount of people, what would that be? Partnering skills, PQ. Use partnering skills. And I'm not just talking for selling, I'm just talking in general. If we think of these things as a means for better collaboration, then we can work on them so that we can work together better. And that's no bad thing. So I use them because I'm talking about a salesperson working with a customer, and if they can do that better, happy days. But organizations internally, people collaborating better, people partnering with their colleagues, fantastic. You know, if we can just generate this mindset of we can, when we come together, achieve so much more, we can make a difference. I think that is the movement that I would want to champion, is get people thinking about partnering and deliberately partnering and working together better. Collaboration rocks. How can our readers follow you online? LinkedIn would be the best place to find me. I'm pretty active on there. I've got various websites, company website, personal website, book website, social media. Go to the job. But if you go to LinkedIn, yeah, it can go down any of those rabbit holes as applicable.